Brutalism is not just an aesthetic, it's an ethic. A belief in the honesty of materials. In spaces that hold weight and meaning without decoration. And when layered with the elemental language of autumn, wool, stone, firelight, it transforms. In this episode of Charette Theory, we enter the living room not as a blank canvas, but as a terrain of raw potential. We'll explore how to design a fall-inspired brutalist space that is both powerful and peaceful. One that honors the geometry of silence and the comfort of form. Welcome to the Zen of Brutalism. Welcome to Charette Theory. As the air sharpens and the light deepens, autumn enters like a quiet breath, steady, grounding, golden. It's a season that changes not only the world outside, but the way we inhabit our interiors. Our homes begin to contract inward, calling us closer to the textures, tones, and rituals that offer warmth and rest. And the living room, the central hearth of our private lives, takes on new purpose. It becomes not just a room, but a threshold between the outer world and our interior selves. In this seasonal shift, we often think of cozy as soft, abundant, even nostalgic. But there is another kind of comfort, one found in strength, in stillness, in form stripped back to its essentials. This is where brutalism enters. Often misunderstood as cold or severe, brutalism is, in truth, deeply human. When framed through the lens of seasonal living, it becomes a style of inwardness, of structure that cradles, of surfaces that speak, of shadows that soothe. To understand how brutalism can hold space for autumn stillness, we must first return to its origins, its philosophical bones. Brutalism was born in the post-war era, in a time marked by scarcity and rebuilding. It rejected ornament in favor of honesty. It favored materials in their natural state, concrete, brick, glass, steel, not as a stylistic choice, but as a moral one. These buildings weren't trying to charm or seduce, they were trying to endure. They spoke in a language of mass and presence, of truth laid bare. The word brutalism comes not from the English word brutal, but from the French term beaten brut, raw concrete. But rawness here is not violence. It's exposure. its structure as story. Brutalism shows you how something is made, and in doing so, it creates a kind of visual integrity that resonates deeply, especially in a world overwhelmed by surfaces. So what does that mean for your living room? It doesn't mean turning your home into a bunker. It means embracing the principle of essential form. Think of a single wall in lime-washed plaster, its uneven texture catching the shadows of an overcast afternoon. Or a monolithic coffee table that feels less like furniture and more like a grounded artifact. Perhaps it's a steel-framed window that lets the rhythm of the season pour in, rain streaking down the glass, branches moving in the wind beyond. Brutalist interiors do not decorate, they reveal. The beams, the columns, the joints and textures, these are not flaws to be concealed. They are the emotional architecture of the space. Where traditional design might soften or adorn, brutalism edits. It pares down. It asks, what is essential? What is enduring? And within that simplicity, something remarkable happens. The space begins to breathe. Without the noise of excess, you notice more. The way light folds across an uneven wall. The warmth of a wool blanket against a cool bench. The sound of your own footsteps moving through stillness. This is where form becomes feeling. When we speak of brutalism in the context of home, especially during autumn, we're not talking about building new walls of concrete. We're talking about honoring what already exists, letting the bones of your space come forward. That might mean uncovering a brick chimney, choosing materials that feel substantial underhand, or placing furniture that echoes the geometry of the room itself. The power of brutalism is not in what it demands, but in what it allows. It allows room for texture, for silence, for clarity. And in the hush of fall, that kind of honesty becomes its own kind of warmth. Autumn is a season of dualities. The world outside turns brittle and brilliant, trees ablaze, air sharp, light low. And inside, we crave the opposite, softness, warmth, depth. This is where brutalism begins to soften, not in its core structure, but in its layering. Its textures. If brutalism gives us the bones, autumn textures offer us the flesh. They wrap around the cool hardness of raw material like breath on glass. A slate-grey modular sofa becomes a canvas for tactile contrast. A heavy wool throw, dark, nubby, substantial, is not an accessory, but an anchor. Drape it over one side. Let it fall with intention. Let it fold, not for flourish, but for comfort. Textiles in a brutalist autumn room are not ornamental. They are functional, intimate, and deeply physical. Felted wool. Looped buccal. Brushed cotton. These are the materials that quiet the space, not with visual noise, but with sensory presence. Consider an ottoman in charcoal felt, catching the low amber of a 4 p.m. sunbeam. It doesn't sparkle. It glows. Subtly. Slowly. Even the rug beneath your feet can act as a threshold between the harsh and the gentle. Choose one that's thick but not fussy, perhaps a flat weave in muted tones, grounded in texture rather than pattern. The goal isn't decoration. It's contrast. It's cohesion. It's the slow interplay between cold and warm, between stone and skin. And wood. Autumn begs for wood, not the lacquered kind, but timber that feels worn, grounded, imperfect. A side table with a live edge. A low bench with visible grain. Let its warmth offset the chill of steel or concrete. Let its age feel like memory made visible. Leather, too, has a role to play. But not in glossy, over-polished forms. Look for matte patinas, leather that looks lived in, that welcomes the touch of a hand and the mark of time. A slingback chair. A stitched cushion. A hide rug. Not in excess, but as punctuation. A reminder of the human in the architectural. You might be surprised how few objects it takes to create this kind of comfort. 1 or 2 elements per zone, chosen with care. In a brutalist space, restraint is not cold, it's generous. It gives every texture room to be felt. To resonate. And don't forget linen. Raw linen, frayed and heavy, can soften the linearity of brutalism without betraying it. A window curtain that filters autumn light like parchment. A floor pillow tucked into a reading corner. These small touches hold space without overwhelming it. When you layer in autumnal textures, you're not just softening brutalism, you're revealing its quiet capacity for intimacy. For stillness. For beauty that doesn't ask to be noticed, but offers itself when you're ready to look. This is the language of fall in a brutalist room. Silent. Substantial. Felt before it's seen. Color, in brutalist design, is never decorative. It's elemental. And in autumn, it begins to stir, quietly, carefully, like fog across concrete. The palette shifts, not toward exuberance, but toward resonance. This is not a season of bright declarations, it's a season of depth. And in a brutalist framework, color becomes emotion made visible. We begin, as always, with the base. Ash. Graphite. Dust. These are the neutral tones that anchor the architecture, the hues of stone, cement, and shadow. They don't compete for attention. They listen. They hold space. But then comes the turn of the season. The slow fire. Autumn enters not with contrast, but with undertone. Rusted reds. Weathered ochres. Deep umbers. Forest greens so muted they feel like memory. These are not pops of color. They're layers. Hints. Echoes. They move through the space like falling leaves, subtle, fleeting, transformative. You might find these tones in something as unassuming as a pillow, mustard velvet pressed against a charcoal sofa. Or in the silent presence of a rust-colored wool throw resting across concrete. A cluster of dried eucalyptus in smoky lavender and pale brown. A single ceramic vessel in burnt sienna. Here, color is not decoration. It's seasonality. It's place. It's mood. Even the wall, often left raw in brutalist rooms, can hold color in the faintest whisper. Perhaps a light wash of taupe lime wash, where pigment and texture blur into one. Or a tapestry, hanging heavy like a shadow, dyed in tones that feel pulled from bark, earth, and ash. Let your color choices emerge slowly. Ask not how they look, but how they feel. Do they settle the space? Do they deepen the quiet? Do they offer warmth without weight? In autumn, brutalism doesn't need to brighten, it needs to deepen. Every hue should feel like it belongs to the materials themselves. As if the rust in the steel, the warmth in the wood, the patina on the plaster, had always been there, just waiting for this season to reveal them. You're not painting a room. You're tuning it. So introduce color as you would introduce scent or sound, sparingly, intentionally. A rust-hued lampshade casting a warm pool of light. A forest green throw folded with care. A bowl of dried fig branches, nearly black, nearly still. In this context, color becomes architecture. It becomes a rhythm. It breathes with the space, moves with the light, and makes the room feel not just seen, but inhabited. Let the autumn palette live here, not as ornament, but as presence. Understated. Grounded. Inevitable. In a brutalist living room, furniture is never just furniture. It is sculpture. It is mass. It is presence. These are not lightweight afterthoughts to fill a room, they are the architecture within the architecture. The forms we live alongside, lean into, rest upon. The shapes that carve silence and motion into a space. Begin with the sofa. It is no longer a plush afterthought, no longer upholstered excess. It becomes a gesture, a grounded, deliberate volume. Low-slung. Monolithic. Its arms, thick with purpose. Its profile, linear and unembellished. Perhaps it's wrapped in a wool-blend fabric the color of dry stone, or structured leather aged to a matte, earthen finish. It doesn't float, it anchors. A coffee table, then. Not round and dainty, but solid. Carved. Perhaps it's a slab of terrazzo with flecks of iron. Or a massive block of reclaimed wood, darkened with time. Maybe oxidized metal, rough at the edges, cool to the touch. It doesn't sit beneath the conversation, it is part of it. And then come the supporting pieces. A bench of blackened ash, all clean lines and exposed grain. A chair that feels like a folded piece of architecture, leather and steel, brutal and elegant. Side tables shaped like stone monoliths, placed not for convenience, but for composition. Each piece must hold its own weight, not just physically, but visually. These are not fill-ins. They are pauses. Statements. Negative space is just as important, what you don't place is as meaningful as what you do. Brutalism teaches us to honor emptiness. To let the furniture breathe. Scale matters here. Go larger, but fewer. Choose one sculptural chair over 3 small ones. One oversized table instead of a collection of surfaces. The room should feel like it was assembled slowly, with intention. Like each object was chosen for its ability to exist without apology. Texture plays its part too. Smooth concrete, unfinished oak, honed travertine. Let these materials remain unhidden, uncoated. There is honesty in showing the hand of the material, its density, its imperfection, its grain. That's where the humanity enters. In autumn, this kind of furniture does more than fill a function. It settles the room. It reflects the season's pull toward grounding and stillness. It makes the room feel rooted, not in trend, but in truth. Let your furniture be more than useful. Let it have form. Let it have weight. Let it become the quiet sculpture through which the entire room begins to speak. In brutalist interiors, the walls do not disappear. They do not recede into anonymity. Instead, they assert themselves, quietly, deliberately, as extensions of the architecture. In many ways, they are the first sculptural gesture of the room. The backdrop becomes the subject. Raw concrete is the most iconic. Cool, mottled, imperfect. Its surface tells the story of formwork and time. The subtle wave of a trowel, the grain of a wooden mold, the ghost of an air bubble left behind. These are not flaws, they are fingerprints. Evidence of making. Of matter made solid. If your space allows, even one accent wall in cast concrete transforms the emotional register of the room. It becomes a statement of honesty and stillness. But brutalist expression is not limited to poured concrete. There are other ways to evoke texture and mass. A wall finished in rough lime plaster, dry and whispery to the touch, adds softness without losing edge. Exposed brick, especially when left in its original, unpainted form, adds rhythm and grain, grounding the space with the memory of structure. Even fiber cement panels, arranged with minimal seams, can echo the visual language of brutalist exteriors brought indoors. And if you're not reconstructing walls, you still have choices. Large format wall panels in dark oak or charred timber, show sugi-ban, can introduce depth without overwhelming. Vertical ribbing in natural materials gives shadow a place to land. Even deeply pigmented paint, in tones like soot, iron, or damp clay, can create a weighty backdrop against which lighter forms emerge with contrast. Wall treatments in this language are not ornamental. They are architectural. They exist to frame light, to receive shadow, to create visual silence. Think of a bare concrete surface just before sunset, how it catches a diagonal slash of amber light. Or how a rough plaster wall diffuses candle glow, turning it into a cloud of warmth. And then there's the question of what lives on the wall. In brutalism, even art is chosen for its relationship to form, texture, and absence. Abstract monochromes, perhaps on raw canvas or thick paper, hang like contemplative voids. Heavy-framed mirrors, their proportions geometric and severe, double the sense of structure. Metal reliefs, charcoals, textile pieces with coarse weave or hand stitching, each one selected not to decorate, but to participate in the language of mass and materiality. Nothing glossy. Nothing overly graphic. Nothing that demands attention louder than the wall itself. Because here, the wall is the art. The surface is the story. And in autumn, this becomes especially potent. As the light shifts earlier each day, the textures of these surfaces come alive. The shadows stretch. The walls glow. And the room becomes a kind of living sculpture, one that changes, ever so subtly, with the season. Let your walls carry weight. Let them speak without words. Let them be the architecture that holds everything else in place. In brutalist interiors, light is not merely a utility, it is a material. It is poured, directed, and shaped just like concrete or steel. And in autumn, it becomes more than that. It becomes a companion. A quiet presence that warms the raw and renders the rigid tender. This is not the season for ceiling floods or sterile LEDs. It is the season of intentional shadows. Of illumination that flickers, pulls, and grazes. Begin by thinking of light as a sculptor. Where do you want softness to gather? Where should shadows fall? Recessed uplighting is one of the most poetic gestures in this vocabulary. Imagine a narrow beam tracing the base of a rough textured wall, lifting the grain of plaster or concrete into subtle relief. Or a linear lead tucked behind a monolithic bench, casting a halo of amber around its weight. These lights do not command attention, they reveal form. They hint at dimension. They give mass a sense of presence. Pendant lights, too, become more than functional. Picture a sculptural industrial fixture suspended low over a concrete coffee table. Its finish is matte black or aged brass, nothing reflective, nothing ornate. The bulb itself is soft, golden, maybe even vintage in character. It casts a circle of warmth beneath it while leaving the edges of the room in contemplative dusk. Floor lamps are chosen for silhouette, not shine. Angled, architectural, often with pivoting arms or exaggerated proportions. They stand like sentinels, their light not flooding the room, but drawing attention to a reading corner, a bench, a texture on the wall. Their geometry becomes part of the room's dialogue, one that values negative space, quiet drama, and pause. Then there are the hidden moments. LEDs tucked behind shelves. Light bars embedded in wall niches. Strip lighting running beneath a floating cabinet, casting a silent glow onto a polished concrete floor. These are the gestures that give brutalism its warmth, because warmth, here, is not about softness of surface, but softness of atmosphere. And then, always, there is fire. Whether literal or symbolic, flame is essential in an autumn brutalist space. It can be a linear gas fireplace set within a blackened steel surround, its flame sharp and still. Or a cluster of stone candle holders arranged on a concrete ledge, beeswax tapers flickering like old rituals in a modern temple. The light moves. It dances. It interrupts the stillness of the room in the most gentle, human way. Lighting in this style does not strive for brightness. It strives for presence. Each fixture, each source, is a gesture, architectural, emotional, precise. Together, they orchestrate a rhythm that mirrors the season, slower, quieter, lower to the ground. Shadows lengthen. Corners deepen. Surfaces breathe. This is illumination as intimacy. Not to dazzle, but to dwell. Not to overpower, but to reveal. Let your lighting carry mood. Let it echo structure. Let it become the architecture that moves when everything else holds still. In a brutalist living room, seasonal styling is never about visual noise. It is not about layering on the obvious cues of fall, orange leaves, plaid throws, or pumpkin-scented everything. Here, autumn arrives more quietly, more thoughtfully, with restraint and reverence. This is a design language that values presence over decoration. So we don't style to embellish. We style to mark the shift in season, to suggest the temperature of the air outside, the turning of light, the inwardness of our own attention. Begin with a single arrangement. A tall, sculptural branch, bare, or perhaps with a few lingering ochre leaves, placed in a stoneware or concrete vessel. Its silhouette becomes a line drawing against the wall. A gesture of autumn, not a replica of it. It catches light. It casts shadow. It does not need to bloom or spill, it only needs to be. Next, think of everyday objects as seasonal sculpture. A good with an imperfect surface, its skin mottled in greys and rusts, placed not on a mantle but on a tray of darkened steel. A ceramic bowl glazed in earth tones, empty or filled with chestnuts or seed pods, placed low on a monolithic coffee table. These are not styled for show. They are curated for resonance. Each item carries weight, not in size, but in presence. A rough wool pillow. A folded linen runner. A handmade vessel placed on a bench like an offering. You don't need many. You only need one or two that feel inevitable, like they were meant to live there, even if only for a season. Even scent becomes part of the palette. Not floral. Not synthetic. But grounding, cedar, vetiver, tobacco, or smoke. Maybe the room holds the faint memory of firewood, or beeswax warming slowly in candlelight. The sensory experience of autumn is not confined to sight. It's in the textures we touch, the air we breathe, the softness beneath our feet. This kind of styling is more ritual than display. It's a conversation with stillness. A way of saying, I see the season turning. I feel it. I make space for it, without clutter. Without excess. In this context, every object becomes a kind of punctuation mark. A pause. A breath. Even the decision to leave a surface empty, to let concrete or terrazzo speak for itself, is a stylistic choice with emotional consequence. So when you dress your space for autumn within the brutalist frame, ask not how much you can add, but how much you can clarify. What object can hold the weight of a story? What gesture can say what needs to be said, without saying too much? Seasonal styling here is not about abundance. It's about awareness. An attentiveness to the natural cycle. A slowing down. A letting in. Let your objects become offerings. Let your choices be few, but felt. This is how autumn speaks in brutalist form, through texture, tone, and quiet observation. In a brutalist living room, functionality isn't concealed beneath decoration, it's integrated into the architecture of the space. Here, utility isn't a compromise, it's an aesthetic in itself. The decisions you make about where to store, where to sit, where to rest a cup of tea, all of it becomes part of the visual language. Clean. Intentional. Quietly expressive. The key is this: nothing should feel like an afterthought. Begin with how you handle comfort. A blanket ladder, simple, elemental, is crafted not from distressed wood or decorative ironwork, but from matte black steel or unfinished oak. It leans, not for show, but for function. It holds a single wool throw, perhaps charcoal or deep rust, not draped casually but folded with care. It reads not as an accessory, but as a form. Floor cushions, too, become more than just casual seating. In brutalism, they're sculptural volumes, dense, geometric, perhaps felted wool or leather with visible stitching. Arranged not randomly, but with the precision of a gallery installation. They invite rest, but they also define space. Shelving becomes architectural rhythm. Think, a wall-mounted unit in dark-stained wood, the grain exposed like a topographic map. Or floating shelves in poured concrete, punctuated by only a few objects, a stack of books, a low-profile ceramic dish, a stone sculpture. These aren't shelves meant to hold everything. They're meant to hold only what matters. They ask you to edit, to curate. Storage must follow the same principle of seamlessness. A built-in bench with a hidden compartment beneath its seat. A niche carved directly into a wall, framing a log pile as though it were art. Even cabinetry, if present, avoids hardware, handles, or embellishment. Instead, it opens with a touch. It disappears into the plane of the wall. Visual noise is replaced by clarity. Even the smallest everyday details are reconsidered. A tray for tea service is concrete or oxidized metal. A magazine rack is not a basket but a slender steel structure with the elegance of a shadow. A side table might be nothing more than a block of wood, charred, sanded, and left unapologetically raw. These are not just choices of aesthetic, they're choices of rhythm. Of pacing. a visual restraint that creates mental ease. Because in a brutalist room prepared for autumn, function must not interrupt form. It must support it. It must echo it. Even comfort itself is reimagined, pared back, elemental, essential. A room that serves you, without ever compromising the architecture of its thought. And in that simplicity, there is a kind of luxury. Not the excess of ornament or softeners, but the richness of intention. A space where every object earns its place. Where nothing is too much. And nothing is missing. Brutalism, for all its material weight, is not silent. It listens. It resonates. And in autumn, when the light softens and the world turns inward, what we invite into our rooms must include more than texture and form. It must include atmosphere. It must include sound. A brutalist living room doesn't fill the air with noise. It shapes the silence. It curates what breaks it. Start with acoustics. Concrete, stone, and steel have sharp edges in sound as well as form, so soft elements become more than tactile comfort, they become sonic buffers. A heavy wool rug absorbs footsteps. Thick linen curtains hush the edges of a window. Even a felted wall panel, quietly installed, mutes the echo. This isn't about muting the world completely. It's about creating a space where sound is deliberate, not accidental. Now, imagine the first sound in the room is not the hum of a screen, but the low crackle of a stylus landing on vinyl. A record player, nestled into a custom niche or resting on a concrete console, playing ambient jazz or minimalist piano, slow, repetitive, and clean. Notes that drift, rather than dominate. Music that becomes a companion to thought, to conversation, or to solitude. And if speakers are part of the room, let them disappear. Tucked behind fiber panels, embedded in the ceiling, or built into the joinery of a wall, their presence is felt, not seen. The goal is immersion, not interruption. This is also the moment where flame becomes an element of emotional architecture. Brutalism may be born of concrete and steel, but it finds its soul in fire. A built-in fireplace with smooth, slate surround. A suspended wood-burning stove, blackened and stark, hovering in the corner like sculpture. Or even a tabletop hearth, minimal, glass-clad, precise. Fire does more than warm. It flickers against concrete, animates the stone, reflects softly off metal. It humanizes the architecture. It makes the brutal tender. Let that flicker become ritual. Light a beeswax candle in a cast stone holder at the same time each day. Use flame not as decoration, but as punctuation, a quiet period at the end of a long sentence. And if windows open to the outside, consider what natural sound filters in. Wind moving through dry leaves. The distant thrum of city life muted by thick glass. Or perhaps, in quieter places, the sharp clack of a branch against a wall in the evening wind. Brutalist design does not resist these sounds. It frames them. It allows space for them to be part of the room's atmosphere. Because brutalism isn't just a visual philosophy. It's emotional architecture. It asks, what do you want to feel when you enter this room? Not what do you want to display? Not what trend to follow? But how should the space carry your energy? How should it respond to the season, the hour, the moment? In autumn, the answer is almost always slower, softer, still. And so we arrive at the threshold once more. Not to close the door on brutalism, but to remind ourselves what it truly offers, especially in a season like autumn. It is often misread, this design language. People see its concrete planes and angular forms and assume severity. But brutalism, in its deepest intention, is not about harshness. It's about honesty. It is a framework that resists artifice. It asks materials to be what they are. And in doing so, it quietly asks the same of us. Autumn, too, makes similar requests. As the days shorten and light settles low on the horizon, we are invited to pare back. To strip the ornamental. To notice texture, shadow, time. We return home not only in the physical sense, but emotionally, to the parts of ourselves that seek stillness, reflection, containment. A brutalist living room in fall is not just a stylistic exercise. It's a gesture of alignment with the earth, with architecture, with ourselves. The cool weight of concrete alongside the glow of a beeswax candle. The hard edge of a stone bench softened by a woolen throw. The hollow quiet between sculptural forms, filled only with music that breathes or silence that calms. This isn't austerity for its own sake. It's clarity. It's precision. It's presence. And it doesn't require a total overhaul. You don't need to rebuild your home in poured concrete to feel this way. Start with one gesture. One monolithic table. One raw wall left unpainted. One lamp that casts a sculptural shadow at dusk. Let brutalism enter gently, through your own rhythm. Because design, when done thoughtfully, is not just a visual language. It is emotional architecture. And in a season like this, when the wind stirs and the air cools and we begin to gather inward, that architecture can hold us. It can support not just our bodies, but our moods, our memories, our moments of pause. So let your fall living room be more than decorated. Let it be distilled, considered, tactile. Let it honor the beauty of the unfinished, the weight of the present, the subtle strength of restraint. As always, I invite you to continue the conversation in the comments below. What does autumn feel like in your space? What are the quiet rituals you turn to? Which materials, forms, or objects speak most deeply to your sense of season? This is Charette Theory, where design meets feeling, and architecture becomes a way of being. Until next time.